The blood was still wet on the walls of New Canberra. When they called for peace, Admiral Corvin Drakmer sat at the obsidian negotiation table, his forearms folded in the traditional Velthari posture of diplomatic patience. The conference hall aboard the neutral station equilibrium hummed with recycled air and the nervous energy of species, trying to pretend the last 18 months of carnage hadn't happened. Representatives from 12 civilizations filled the chamber-scaled Renati with their jeweled crests, the crystalline Jelkari whose bodies chimed with each movement, and the gas-welling Nephrim who attended via containment suits that leaked their toxic atmosphere in wisps, but all eyes kept drifting to the human delegation. 3 of them sat rigid in their simple gray uniforms, their pale faces masks of controlled emotion. Fleet Admiral Victoria Halstead, silver-haired and granite-jawed, maintained perfect military bearing. Beside her, Ambassador Robert Voss fidgeted with his stylus, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights spent crafting compromise. Language, the third human, Commander Ellen O'Rourke, hadn't moved for 20 minutes. She stared directly at Drakmer with eyes that held the cold fury of deep space. The Terran Union acknowledges the unfortunate escalation of recent conflicts, Voss began, his voice careful and measured. However, we must address the systematic targeting of civilian populations or regrettable collateral damage. Drakmer interrupted, his primary arm spreading in what his species considered an apologetic gesture. War brings casualties. The Velthari Dominion takes no pleasure in the deaths of non-combatants. Rourke's laugh was like breaking glass. Collateral damage. Every head turned toward her. Halstead shot her a warning look, but Rourke was already standing, her chair scraping against the deck plates with metallic finality. "Commander," Voss whispered urgently, "this isn't the time." "When is the time?" Rourke's voice carried across the chamber like a challenge. "When we buried another million civilians? When we've forgotten what they did to New Canberra, to Kepler Station, to the colony ships?" The translator circuit struggled with the emotion in her words, reducing them to clinical syllables that somehow made them more chilling. She walked to the central display, her boots echoing in the sudden silence. "Show them," she said to the chamber's AI. "Commander Rourke, I must insist." Voss began. "Show them what collateral damage looks like." The holographic display flickered, the life filling the center of the room with three-dimensional horror. New Canberra's residential district materialized in sickening detail-twisted metal, vaporized buildings, and the distinctive scorch patterns of Velthari plasma weapons. The death toll scrolled past in sterile numbers, 1,847,193 confirmed dead. 400,000 missing, presumed vaporized. "They didn't target our military installations," Rourke said, her voice steady as she walked around the display. "They didn't go after our shipyards or command centers. They bombed schools, hospitals, refugee centers." She stopped in front of Drakmer, close enough that he could smell the recycled air on her breath. "They bombed playgrounds." The Velthari admirals for eyes never wavered. "War requires difficult choices. Your species understands this better than most." "You're right," Rourke said softly. "We do." Something in her tone made Halstead tense. 20 years of serving under Rourke had taught her to recognize that particular inflection the moment when Ellen O'Rourke stopped being a diplomat and became something much more dangerous. "Commander," Halstead said carefully, "perhaps we should. The Terran Union has authorized me to negotiate," Rourke continued, her gaze never leaving Drakmer, "to discuss terms, to find a path to peace." She smiled, and several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but they made one critical error in their instructions. The chamber held its breath. They assumed I wanted peace. Voss was on his feet now, his diplomatic training warring with panic. "Commander Rourke, you don't have the authority to Article 7 of the Defense Authorization Act," Rourke said, pulling a data pad from her pocket. "In cases where civilian populations face extinction-level threats, field commanders are authorized to take any necessary action to preserve human life." She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with each delegation in turn. "I'd say losing the billion civilians qualifies." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Then Drakmer leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. "What are you proposing?" Human Rourke's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "I'm not proposing anything, Admiral. I'm telling you what's going to happen. The Velthari Dominion is going to withdraw from all human systems, pay reparations for every life lost, and submit there were criminals for judgment." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Or we're going to demonstrate exactly what collateral Damage looks like when humans stop trying to be civilized. The chamber erupted in shock, chittering, and alarmed translations. Voss grabbed Rourke's arm, his face pale with horror. Elena, you can't. This will mean war with everyone. The entire galaxy stood by and watched while they butchered our children, Rourke said, shaking off his grip. Now they get to watch us return the favor. The first shots were fired 6 hours after the conference adjourned in chaos. Commander Eleanor Rourke stood on the bridge of the Vindication, a Nemesis-class dreadnought that humanity had built in the dark years after first contact proved that the galaxy was not as peaceful as their xenobiologists had hoped. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the efficiency of veterans who had learned their trade in the furnace of interstellar war. Admiral Drakmer's fleet has taken position around the Velthari Embassy Station, reported Lieutenant Commander James Vega, her tactical officer. 43 heavy cruisers, 12 dreadnoughts, and what looks like their new Titan-class vessel, the inevitable Dawn, Rourke said, studying the tactical display to kilometers of Velthari engineering. At its finest, plasma cannons that can crack a moon, shields that can stop a supernova. She smiled, perfect. Her communications officer, a young woman named Patricia Kane, looked up from her station with barely concealed anxiety. Ma'am, we're receiving hails from the other delegations. The Renati are demanding we stand down. The Jelkari are threatening to intervene if we fire on diplomatic vessels. And the Nephrim, they're moving their fleet to support the Velthari. Around the bridge, officers exchanged glances. The Nephrim were the galaxy's arms dealers, suppliers of exotic weapons to anyone with the right currency. If they were taking sides, the situation had just escalated beyond a simple human Velthari conflict. How long until the rest of our fleet arrives? Rourke asked. 18 hours, Vega replied. Admiral Halstead is bringing everything she can spare, but we're outnumbered 20-1. Rourke nodded calmly. Good, I'd hate for this to be easy. She walked to the forward viewport, watching the Velthari formation spread across the star field like a metallic constellation. Each ship represented thousands of lives, entire crews who had families, dreams, futures. In the old days 3 years ago, before New Canberra, that might have given her pause. Ma'am, Kane said softly, Admiral Halstead is requesting immediate communication. Put her through. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Halstead's concerned face. The aging admiral looked like she'd aged a decade in the past 6 hours. Elena, for God's sake, stand down. You're starting a war we can't win. We already lost the war we could win, Rourke replied. Remember, it ended when they turned a billion civilians into vapor. This isn't justice, it's suicide. Look at your tactical display. You're facing the entire Velthari Third Fleet with one ship. Not one ship. Rourke's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. One very special ship. She nodded to Vega, who activated a secondary display showing the Vindication's internal schematics, where a normal dreadnought would carry missile tubes and particle beam arrays. The Vindication was hollow, its entire central section converted into a single massive weapon system. Elena, Halstead's voice was barely a whisper. Please tell me you didn't. Project Damocles was approved after Kepler Station. Rourke said calmly, one ship, one weapon, one chance to show the galaxy what happens when you mistake human restraint for weakness. The communication cut out. Around the bridge, the crew worked in tense silence, everyone understanding that they were either about to witness history or become part of it. Incoming transmission from the inevitable Dawn, Kane reported. On screen, Admiral Drakmer's four-armed form filled the display, his alien features rigid with what might have been anger or amusement. Human xenobiologists still debated whether the Velthari even experienced emotions as humans understood them. Commander Rourke, your theatrics at the conference were impressive, but ultimately meaningless. You have one ship, I have 55. Withdraw now, and I will ensure your court-martial is conducted with honor. Counteroffer, Rourke said. Pleasantly, you have 1 hour to withdraw your forces to beyond the system's heliopause. After that, I demonstrate why humans don't negotiate with mass murderers. Drakmer's laugh was like grinding metal. You would sacrifice your ship and crew for empty gestures. Your species' reputation for irrationality appears to be justified. Not empty, Rourke corrected. Expensive. Very, very expensive. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. These men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing it was likely suicide. They were the children of colonies that had been burned, the siblings of victims, the survivors of Velthari collateral damage. Their faces held the same cold fury that Rourke felt in her bones. All hands. She announced over the ship's intercom, "This is the commander. Today we demonstrate something the galaxy seems to have forgotten, that humans protect their own, no matter the cost. In 18 minutes, we fire the first shot of humanity's real war. Make sure it counts." The Velthari fleet began moving, their ships spreading into attack formation with the fluid grace of apex predators. Plasma weapons charged with building wines that registered on the vindication sensors. Point defense systems came online. Shields shimmered to life around the alien vessels like soap bubbles made of pure energy. "They're targeting our engines and weapons," Vega reported. "Standard doctrine, they want to capture us intact." "Of course. They do," Rourke said. "They're still thinking like civilized beings." She settled into her command chair, her fingers dancing across the control surfaces. "Arm Project Damocles. Full power to the containment field." And Vega, "Yes, Mom. When this is over, make sure the black box gets transmitted to every human colony, every news feed, every diplomatic channel in known space. I want the galaxy to see exactly what we're capable of." The countdown timer hit 0. Space erupted in fire. The Velthari opened fire with the disciplined fury of a species that had conquered 17 star systems. Plasma bolts the size of shuttlecraft screamed across the void, converging on the vindication from 43 different vectors. The human dreadnought shields flared white-hot, bleeding energy into space as they struggled to disperse the incoming fire. Lesser ships would have been vaporized in the first salvo. The vindication merely shuddered and kept flying. "Shields down to 60%. Vega shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Damage control teams are responding." Commander Rourke gripped her command chair as another wave of plasma fire hammered their defenses. The bridge lights flickered, and she could smell the acrid burn of overloaded circuits. Around her, the crew worked with desperate efficiency, their hands flying over control surfaces as they fought to keep their ship alive. "Return fire," she ordered. "All weapons, full spread." The vindication's particle beams lanced out like spears of coherent light, striking the nearest Velthari cruiser square amidships. The alien vessel shields held for exactly 3 seconds before collapsing in a cascade of brilliant failure. The beams punched through armor plating like paper, venting atmosphere and debris in glittering streams. But for every shot the humans landed, 20 more came back. The Velthari were methodical, professional, overwhelming. Their ships moved in perfect formation, concentrating fire while maintaining optimal spacing to avoid collateral damage to their own forces. "Commander," Lieutenant King called out, her voice tight with strain, "we're receiving transmissions from the other delegations. The Renati are offering to mediate. The Jelkari are threatening to intervene if we don't cease hostilities. Tell them to take their mediation," and Rourke's response was cut off. As the ship lurched violently to starboard, warning lights bathed the bridge in hellish red. Direct hit to the port engine cluster. Engineering Chief Marcus Webb's voice crackled over the comm. "We're down to 40% supply thrust, and command of the containment field for Project Damocles is fluctuating. If we take much more damage." "I know," Rourke cut him off. She couldn't afford to let the crew hear about the risks, not when they were this close. The tactical display showed the grim mathematics of their situation. The vindication was alone against an entire fleet, trading fire with ships that had been designed specifically to kill human vessels. Their armor was holding, their weapons were still firing, but basic physics was against them. They had minutes, maybe less, before catastrophic failure. "Ma'am," Vega said quietly, "the inevitable dawn is moving to attack position." The Velthari flagship was a mountain of metal and malice, twice the size of any other ship in the system. Its plasma cannons were already glowing with building charge, and Rourke knew that when they fired, her ship wouldn't survive the hit. Time. To Damocles' firing sequence, 3 minutes, 18 seconds. Too long. The flagship would be in optimal firing position in 90 seconds. "Commander," Kane's voice cut through the chaos, "I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions, multiple contacts dropping out of FTL." The tactical display exploded with new contacts. Ships materialized out of the twisted space-time of hyperspace, like angry ghost Trinati battlecruisers with their distinctive swept wings, Jelkari crystal ships that looked like frozen lightning, and the bulbous forms of Nephrim gas haulers, converted into makeshift weapons platforms. "Neutral forces," Vega breathed. "They're actually intervening, but O'Rourke's satisfaction lasted exactly 6 seconds, until she realized which side they were supporting. All ships, this is War Master Kethriel of the Renati Combined Fleet. A new voice filled the bridge, translated into crisp, emotionless English. The human vessel will stand down immediately. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and in violation of 17 interstellar treaties. They're targeting us, Vega reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. All of them. They're forming a unified battle line with the Velthari. Rourke stared at the tactical display, watching humanity's former allies array themselves alongside the species that had murdered billions of human civilians, the galaxy's greatest civilizations, working together for the first time in recorded history to protect the perpetrators of genocide. They're not going to let us win, she said quietly. They can't. If humanity demonstrates that we can take revenge for our dead, it changes everything. Every species in the galaxy becomes fair game for retaliation. Commander, Webb's voice was urgent over the comm. The containment field is destabilizing. If we don't fire in the next 90 seconds, I know. Rourke closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command like a physical thing pressing down on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her crew saw something that made them sit up straighter, the look of a human who had stopped caring about survival and started caring only about the message she would leave behind. All hands, this is the commander, she announced shipwide. Today we learned something about our place in the galaxy. We learned that when humans are slaughtered by the millions, the great civilizations of known space will close ranks to protect the killers. Her voice carried the calm certainty of absolute conviction. So be it. If they want to stand with genocidal murderers, they can burn with them. She turned to Vega. Target the inevitable dawn. Full power to Project Damocles, ma'am, Kane interrupted. Admiral Halstead's fleet just dropped out of hyperspace. 47 ships, coming in fast. The reinforcements materialized in perfect formation: human dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, and the sleek forms of the experimental Reaper-class ships that most of the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Halstead's voice filled the bridge, hard as vacuum-forged steel. Elena, stand down immediately. That's a direct order. Rourke looked at the tactical display, watching her reinforcements spread out to engage the alien fleet, humanity's newest ships against the combined might of 3 galactic powers. It would be glorious. It would be devastating. It would be exactly what the galaxy needed to see. Negative, Admiral, she replied. I have my orders from the Defense Authorization Act. Protect human life by any means necessary. She paused, watching. The first exchanges of fire began between the fleets. Today we teach the galaxy what any means necessary actually looks like. The countdown timer hit 60 seconds. The Vindication shuddered as another plasma salvo found its mark, and in the depths of the ship, something that had been designed to crack planets began to wake up. The space between stars became a furnace. Admiral Halstead's reinforcement fleet struck the alien formation like a hammered blow, their ships screaming, in at near-relativistic speeds with weapons already charging. The Retribution, Halstead's flagship, opened fire on a Renati battlecruiser at point-blank range, her particle beams punching through crystalline armor to detonate the ship's fusion core. The explosion lit up half the system, sending shock waves that rattled every vessel within 1,000 kilometers. But the aliens adapted quickly. The Velthari Third Fleet pivoted to engage the newcomers. While maintaining pressure on the Vindication, the Jelkari ships began broadcasting some kind of resonance weapon that made human hulls sing like tuning forks, their crystalline forms pulsing with malevolent light, and the Nephrim gas haulers released clouds of their toxic atmosphere, creating environmental hazards that forced human ships to divert power from weapons to life support. Jesus Christ! Vega shouted as a Renati plasma torpedo detonated against their forward shields. They're not holding back anymore. This is full-scale warfare. Commander Rourke watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Around the system, nearly 200 ships were engaged in the largest space battle since the Confederation Wars. 3 centuries ago, ships died in brilliant flashes of light, their crews vaporized in milliseconds as reactor cores overloaded or magazines detonated. The void between planets filled with debris fields that would persist for millennia. Commander, Engineering Chief Webb's voice was strained. Damocles is ready to fire, but the targeting array took damage from that last hit. I need another 30 seconds to recalibrate. 30 seconds they didn't have. The inevitable dawn was closing to optimal firing range, its massive plasma cannons building to full charge. When they fired, the Vindication would die in with it. Humanity's only chance to demonstrate that genocide carried consequences. Vega, Rourke said calmly, emergency power to engines. All remaining power, Mum, that would leave us with no shields, no weapons except Damocles. Do it. The bridge lights dimmed as every available erg of energy flowed to the ship's damaged engines. The Vindication lurched forward, accelerating directly toward the Velthari flagship like a guided missile. With delusions of grandeur, Admiral Drakmer's voice filled their communications channel. No longer calm and professional, Commander Rourke, you are on a collision course. Alter your heading immediately. Negative, Rourke replied. I'm exactly where I need to be. The two massive ships closed the distance at a combined velocity that turned space itself into a weapon. The inevitable dawn fired everything it had: plasma cannons, particle beams, kinetic penetrators, all focused on the single human ship, racing toward it like a bullet fired from hell itself. Without shields, the Vindication began to come apart. Under the barrage, hull plates peeled away in sheets of vaporized metal. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches, carrying with it the bodies of crew members who had been in the wrong place. When death came calling, the ship's superstructure groaned with stress fractures that would have been audible if sound could travel through vacuum. Hull integrity at 15%. Webb shouted over the intercom, "We're breaking up. Damocles targeting locked." Another voice called out, "Firing solution confirmed." Rourke looked around her bridge one last time. Most of her crew was dead or dying, their stations dark with smoke and failure. Lieutenant Kane was slumped over her console, blood pooling beneath her head. Vega was still at his post, one arm hanging useless at his side, his face gray with shock and determination. "It's been an honor," she told her surviving crew. Then, to the ship's AI, "Fire Project Damocles. Full yield." In the heart of the Vindication, magnetic containment fields collapsed in a precisely calculated sequence. For 3 years, human scientists had worked to weaponize the fundamental forces of creation to take the same reaction that powered stars and focus it into a beam of pure annihilation. The weapon that fired from the dying ship was less a projectile than a brief, localized impersonation of stellar nucleosynthesis. The beam struck the inevitable dawn amidships and simply erased everything it touched to kilometers of Velthari engineering armor plating that could withstand asteroid impacts, internal bulkheads designed to contain fusion explosions, the crystalline neural networks that served as the ship's brain. All of it became plasma. In the space between heartbeats, the flagship died so quickly that its crew never knew what hit them. One moment Admiral Drakmer was shouting orders to his bridge crew. The next, he and everything around him had been converted to constituent atoms and scattered across several light minutes of space. But the Vindication had paid the price for her victory. Rourke felt the deck plates buckle beneath her feet as her ship's spinal structure finally gave way. Emergency lights failed, leaving the bridge in darkness lit only by the hellish glow of plasma fires and the cold stars visible through gaps in the hull. "Commander," Vega gasped, his voice barely audible over the sound of the ship dying around them. "Did we get them?" Rourke looked at her tactical display, now showing only static and fragments of data. But through the bridge's shattered viewport, she could see the expanding cloud of superheated gas that had once been the pride of the Velthari fleet. "We got them," she confirmed. The Vindication broke apart 6 minutes later, her hull finally surrendering to the accumulated damage of her sacrifice. The escape pods that jettisoned in her final moments carried fewer than 300 survivors from a crew of 2,000. But across the system, the battle continued with renewed fury. The destruction of both flagships had eliminated any pretense of restraint. Human ships rammed their opponents when their weapons failed. Alien vessels coordinated massive bombardments that left human destroyers as expanding clouds of debris. The space around the diplomatic station became a graveyard, where the wreckage of a dozen civilizations drifted in silent accusation. Admiral Halstead, watching from the bridge of the Retribution, realized that Commander Rourke had achieved something beyond mere revenge. She had started a war that would reshape the galaxy, a conflict where humanity would either prove it deserved its place among the stars or be exterminated by species that had learned to fear what humans could become when their children were murdered. The battle was far from over, but the die had been cast, and there would be no peace talks to follow. The vacuum between worlds became a charnel house of light and metal. Admiral Victoria Halstead watched from the bridge of the Retribution as her fleet engaged in the kind of three-dimensional warfare that doctrine said was impossible to win. Around her, nearly 300 ships from 4 different species carved paths of destruction. Through space itself, their weapons turning the star system into a constellation of death. Status report, she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos of combat communications. We've lost the indomitable, furious, and resolute, her tactical officer, Commander Sarah Voss, Ambassador Voss's daughter, who had requested combat duty after her father's diplomatic mission failed, reported with mechanical precision. The Jelkari are using some kind of resonance weapon that's causing hull fractures. The Nephrim are deploying chemical weapons in violation of 17 interstellar treaties. Screw the treaties, Halstead growled. They went out the airlock. When they chose to protect genocide, she studied the tactical display, watching red icons representing human ships wink out of existence with heartbreaking regularity. What about our new ships, the Reaper class, performing beyond expectations? Voss replied with grim satisfaction. The Harvester just took down 3 Renati cruisers in a coordinated strike. The Executioner is leading an attack on the Velthari support vessels. The Reaper-class ships were humanity's answer to the galaxy's technological superiority, smaller, faster, and equipped with weapons that had been designed specifically to kill alien vessels. Unlike the traditional human approach of building ships that could take punishment and keep fighting, the Reapers were pure predators, designed to strike hard and disappear before their enemies could respond. Captain Lisa Park's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel from the bridge of the Harvester. Admiral, we've identified a weakness in the Jelkari formation. Their crystal ships are vulnerable to concentrated electromagnetic pulse. If we can coordinate a strike, her transmission cut off in a burst of static. As a Renati plasma torpedo found its mark, the Harvester died in a brief, brilliant explosion that left nothing but expanding gas and the bitter knowledge that even humanity's best weapons were not enough. That's 7 Reapers down, Voss reported, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. We're running out of ships, Admiral. Halstead nodded grimly. The mathematics of the battle were inexorable. Humanity was outnumbered 3-1, and their technological advantages were being systematically neutralized by enemies who had been building warships for millennia. But she had not come here to win a clean victory. She had come to ensure that the galaxy understood the price of murdering human civilians. All ships, she broadcast on the fleet command frequency. This is Admiral Halstead. Today we fight not for victory, but for memory. Every alien ship we destroy is a message to the galaxy: harm humanity's children, and we will burn your civilization to ash. She paused, watching another human destroyer die under concentrated fire from a Velthari battle group. Make them pay for every meter of space. Make them remember why humans are not prey. The response was immediate and vicious. The surviving human ships abandoned all pretense of formation flying and threw themselves at their enemies with the desperation of corner predators. The heavy cruiser Vengeance rammed a Jelkari crystal ship, her fusion core detonating on impact to take both vessels out of existence. In a flash of artificial sunlight, the destroyer Retribution Shadow used her last functional weapon to cripple a Nephrim gas hauler, then used her engines to ram the crippled vessel's command section. But the aliens were learning, adapting, coordinating their attacks with the efficiency of species that had conquered the galaxy through cooperation, rather than individual heroics. A coordinated strike by 12 Renati vessels caught the human battlecruiser Dauntless in a crossfire that overwhelmed her shields in seconds. The ship's armor held for exactly long enough for her crew to realize they were going to die, then failed catastrophically as plasma fire cooked her hull to vapor. Admiral, Commander Voss said quietly, we're down to 18 ships. The aliens still have over 100 functional vessels. Halstead studied the tactical display, watching the slow strangulation of her fleet. In 30 minutes of combat, they had inflicted tremendous casualties on their enemy's 43 alien ships destroyed. Dozens more damaged, but basic mathematics was against them. Soon, the last human vessels would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, and the galaxy would learn that humans could be defeated through conventional warfare. That was unacceptable. Signal the reckoning, she ordered. Tell Captain Torres to execute. Protocol 7. Boss's face went white. Admiral, that's an order. Protocol 7 was humanity's final argument to tactics so desperate that it had never been used in actual combat, only tested in remote star systems where the consequences could be contained. But these were not normal circumstances, and Admiral Halstead had not survived 40 years of warfare by playing by conventional rules. The Reckoning was one of the newer dreadnoughts, built with modifications that most of the fleet didn't know about. As Voss watched in horror, the massive ship began to accelerate directly toward the center of the alien formation. Her engines burning at 110% of rated capacity. "This is Captain Torres to all ships," came the transmission from the doomed vessel. "It's been an honor serving with you. Tell Earth that we remembered our duty." The Reckoning struck the center of the Velthari formation, traveling at nearly 1/10 the speed of light. The kinetic energy of the impact was enough to crack a small moon, but that wasn't the real weapon. Hidden in the ship's hull were 4 to 7 antimatter charges, each one designed to detonate in sequence to maximize the destruction. The explosion lit up the entire star system. When the glare faded, 17 alien ships had been reduced to component atoms, and the survivors were scattered across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Their formations disrupted and their coordination shattered. "My God," Voss whispered, staring at the tactical display. She never finished the sentence. A Jelkari resonance beam struck the Retribution amidships, and Admiral Halstead's flagship began to sing her death song as her hull plates harmonized themselves into structural failure. But across the system, something had changed. The alien fleets were no longer advancing with confident precision. They were retreating, regrouping, trying to understand an enemy that would sacrifice dreadnoughts like missiles and treat antimatter like ammunition. Humanity had lost the battle, but they had won something more important: the terrible respect of predators who had finally realized that humans were not prey, but rather something much more dangerous. They were a species that refused to die quietly. The Retribution died with her guns firing. Admiral Halstead felt the deck plates buckle beneath her feet as the Jelkari resonance weapon tore through her flagship's superstructure. Like a tuning fork made of crystallized hatred, around her, the bridge crew worked their stations even as bulkheads collapsed. An atmosphere vented through rents in the hull that glowed with the heat of molecular dissolution. "Hull integrity at 7%. Someone shouted. Halstead couldn't tell who threw. The chaos of alarms and the sound of her ship screaming itself apart. Reactor containment failing. "We have maybe 2 minutes before the transmission cut off as a section of the overhead collapsed, crushing the engineering station under several tons of twisted metal. But the surviving crew members didn't pause in their duties. They were human, and humans did not surrender while their children's murderers still drew breath. "Signal the fleet," Halstead ordered, her voice steady despite the blood running down her face from a head wound. She couldn't remember receiving. "All remaining ships, this is Admiral Halstead. Execute General Order 17. Commander Voss looked up from her shattered tactical display, her face white with understanding. "Admiral, that will mean—" "I know what it means," Halstead cut her off. "Do it." General Order 17 was humanity's nuclear option, the tactic they had hoped never to use. Every human ship in the system received the transmission simultaneously and across the battlefield. Captains who had been fighting the losing battles suddenly found themselves with new orders. That changed everything. The surviving human vessels 11 ships from a fleet that had numbered 4 to 7 suddenly broke off their individual engagements and began accelerating toward a single point in space. Not toward the enemy formations, not toward any tactical objective that conventional warfare would recognize. They were heading for the diplomatic station. Captain Marcus Webb, formerly the engineering chief of the destroyed Vindication, now commanding the damaged destroyer Perseverance, understood the order immediately. His ship had taken critical damage to her weapons systems and life support. Her crew reduced to barely 30 souls from an original complement of 400. But she still had engines, and engines were all he needed. "This is Captain Webb to all ships," he transmitted on the fleet frequency. "Form up on my position. Standard Delta formation, maximum burn." The alien fleets, still reeling from the antimatter detonation that had vaporized 17 of their vessels, were slow to understand what the humans were doing. The remaining Velthari ships moved to intercept, their plasma cannons charging. For what they expected to be the final engagement of the battle, they were wrong. The human ships didn't slow down or return fire. Instead, they accelerated past the aliens, taking terrible damage but refusing to deviate from their course. The heavy cruiser Defiant lost her entire forward section to a concentrated barrage, but her surviving crew kept the engines running at emergency power. The destroyer Relentless took a direct hit that killed half her crew, but her captain, a 24-year-old lieutenant who had been promoted 3 times, During the battle maintained course even as her ship's hull began to glow cherry red from atmospheric friction. What are they doing? Admiral Drakmer's replacement, Fleet Commander Kethmer, demanded from the bridge of the Velthari vessel Eternal Victory. They're heading directly for the diplomatic station. That's a neutral facility. But the humans weren't interested in diplomatic niceties anymore. The diplomatic station Equilibrium housed more than just the conference facilities. It was the galaxy's primary communication hub, the nerve center through which every major civilization coordinated their activities. Destroying it would cripple interstellar commerce and communication for decades. More importantly, it would serve as humanity's final message to the galaxy. Captain Webb's voice filled the communication channels, broadcast on every frequency simultaneously. To every species listening, this is Captain Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Force. Today you learned what happens when civilized species choose to protect genocidal murderers. You chose to stand with those who slaughter human children. So be it. The Perseverance struck the station's central hub traveling at 12% of light speed. The kinetic impact alone was equivalent to a strategic nuclear weapon, but Webb had armed his ships remaining antimatter charges before impact. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the diplomatic station was gone along with the communication rays, the trade coordination centers, and the vast databases that had taken centuries to compile. Also gone were the representatives from a dozen species who had been evacuating too slowly, their ships caught in the expanding fireball of humanity's final statement. The alien fleets found themselves suddenly isolated, their communication networks severed, their coordination shattered. Without the station's relay systems, ships from different species couldn't even talk to each other. Their translation protocols required the massive processing power that had just been converted to plasma, but the tactical situation had changed in ways that went beyond mere communication failures. As the shockwave from the station's destruction propagated through the system, new contacts began appearing on long-range sensors. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace, hundreds of them, arriving from every direction simultaneously. Human vessels that had been thought destroyed weeks ago in distant systems. Colony defense forces that had abandoned their posts to answer humanity's call for vengeance. Even civilian ships that had been hastily converted into makeshift weapons. Platforms. Commander Ellen O'Rourke's sacrifice had not just started a battle, it had lit a signal fire that burned across human space, calling every ship, every crew, every human who could hold a weapon to come to this place and make a stand. The newcomers were not a fleet in any conventional sense. They were a mob, an angry swarm of vessels united only by their species and their fury. Battered cargo haulers flew alongside pristine military dreadnoughts. Civilian pleasure craft that had been fitted with mining lasers fought next to experimental warships fresh from the shipyards, and leading them all was a ship that had been reported destroyed at the Battle of Kepler. Stationed the super dreadnought, humanity's wrath, her hull scarred by a dozen battles, but her weapons still functional. Admiral Catherine Reyes had been presumed dead for 6 months. Her ship had been listed as destroyed, her crew marked as casualties, but they had survived, hiding in the asteroid fields of dead systems, gathering allies, preparing for this moment. This is Admiral Reyes to all human vessels. Her voice filled the communication channels, strong and clear despite the static of battle damage. Today we settle accounts. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. The human swarm struck the scattered alien fleets like a tsunami of controlled fury. Ships that had been fighting a desperate rearguard action suddenly found themselves supported by overwhelming force. The mathematics of the battle shifted in seconds from hopeless last stand to righteous slaughter. The Velthari, Renati, Jelkari, and Nephrim forces tried to reform their battle lines, but without central coordination. Their sophisticated tactics collapsed into individual ship actions. Human vessels swarmed damaged alien ships like antibodies attacking an infection. Overwhelming point defenses through sheer numbers. The tide had turned, but the cost of victory would be measured in entire worlds, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 hours after the arrival of humanity's avenging fleet, the last alien vessel died in a brief flash of light that illuminated the wreckage of what had once been called civilization. Admiral Catherine Reyes stood on the bridge of the humanity's wrath, surveying a star system that had become a graveyard. Debris fields stretched across millions of cubic kilometers. Twisted metal that had once been proud warships, escape pods that would drift forever in the cold between worlds. and the slowly expanding clouds of gas that marked where entire crews had been vaporized in the heat of battle. The final tally was carved in fire across the tactical displays: 237 alien vessels destroyed, their combined crews numbering in the millions. The human cost had been equally terrible. Of the nearly 300 ships that had participated in the battle, fewer than 60 remained functional, but they had won. More than that, they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy for centuries. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining alien ships. The Renati are requesting immediate ceasefire. The Jelkari are. They're asking for mercy." Reyes almost laughed. Mercy. After they had stood with the perpetrators of genocide, after they had tried to protect the species that had turned human children into vapor, they were asking for mercy. "Signal all alien vessels," she ordered. "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran Defense Force. You have 30 minutes to evacuate this system. Any ship remaining after that deadline will be considered hostile and destroyed." She paused, looking out at the wreckage that surrounded them. "Tell them this is the only mercy they will receive from humanity." The evacuation was swift and desperate. Alien ships fled the system in disorder, many of them carrying damage that would cripple them for months. They left behind their dead, their wounded, and any pretense that the galaxy's great civilizations were united in anything except fear. As the last alien vessel disappeared into hyperspace, Reyes activated the fleet-wide communication system. Across 60 ships, exhausted crews listened to words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. For generations to come, today, we learned something about our neighbors, she began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. We learned that when human children are slaughtered by the millions, the galaxy's great civilizations will unite to protect the killers. We learned that mercy is seen as weakness, that civilization is a luxury the galaxy cannot afford, and that humanity stands alone among the stars. She looked around her battle-scarred bridge at crew members who had lost friends, family members, entire worlds to the conflict that had started with a failed peace conference. So be it. If the galaxy wants to see humans as monsters, we will be the monsters they fear. Every species that supported our enemies today will learn the price of their choice. Every world that gave comfort to genocidal murderers will burn, and every civilization that thinks humans are weak will discover exactly how wrong they are. The response from the surviving ships was immediate and unanimous, a roar of approval that filled the communication channels with the voices of humans who had been pushed afar and had finally decided to push back. But Admiral Reyes was not finished. "Transmit this recording to every human colony, every news network, every diplomatic channel in known space," she ordered. "Let Earth know what happened here. Let every human world understand that we are no longer begging for acceptance from species that see us as disposable. From this day forward, humanity takes what it needs and destroys what threatens it." She turned to her tactical officer, a young woman whose family had died in the New Canberra massacre. "Prepare the fleet for hyperspace. We have a galaxy to educate." The human fleet departed the system 6 hours later, leaving behind a debris field that would serve as a monument to the day the galaxy learned to fear humanity. The wreckage of 200 alien ships drifted in eternal orbit around a dead diplomatic station, a reminder that some species did not forgive, did not forget, and did not negotiate with the murderers of their children. Within days, the recordings of the battle reached every human colony in known space. The images of Admiral Drachmer's flagship being vaporized by Eleanor Rourke's sacrifice. The footage of human ships ramming alien vessels in suicidal attacks. The final transmission from Captain Webb as he turned a diplomatic station into a funeral. All of it spread through human space like wildfire. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colony defense forces mobilized. Industrial world shifted to wartime production. Every human world that had ever lost civilians to alien attack began building ships, training crews, and preparing for the war that Eleanor Rourke had started with. Her refusal to forget the galaxy's great civilizations, meanwhile, discovered that their victory had cost them everything. Without the diplomatic station's communication networks, interstellar trade collapsed. Species that had cooperated for centuries found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate responses to the human fleets that began appearing in their systems. With uncomfortable regularity, the Velthari Dominion was the first to fall. Human fleets struck their core worlds simultaneously, turning their cities into seas of glass and their orbital installations into expanding clouds of debris. When the Velthari government attempted to surrender, they received Admiral Reyes' response: "You had your chance for peace. You chose genocide instead." The Renati tried to negotiate, offering massive reparations and the surrender of their military leaders. The human response was to destroy their primary shipyards and declare their space off limits to all non-human vessels. The Jelkari attempted to forge an alliance against humanity, only to discover that their former allies were too busy defending their own worlds to spare ships for cooperative efforts. Within 2 years, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Humanity controlled the most strategically valuable star systems. Their fleets patrolled the primary trade routes, and their demands for reparations had crippled the economies of 3 major civilizations. The peace talks had indeed failed because one human had refused to forget the slaughter of her people. But Ellen O'Rourke's sacrifice had achieved something that no diplomatic agreement could have accomplished. It had taught the galaxy that humans were not prey to be hunted, not children to be patronized, not a junior species to be tolerated. They were predators who remembered every slight, who never forgave the murder of their young, and who had finally stopped pretending to be civilized. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, and humanity, for the first time since reaching the stars, was no longer afraid. In the end, Commander Ellen O'Rourke got exactly what she had wanted: a galaxy where human children could sleep safely, protected by the knowledge that anyone who threatened them would face the full fury of a species that had chosen survival over civilization, victory over mercy, and vengeance over peace. The peace talks had failed, but humanity had won something far more valuable than any treaty: the terrible respect of predators, who had learned not to mistake human restraint for weakness. And in the cold mathematics of interstellar politics, respect bought with blood was the only currency that truly mattered.